My name is Elena Mercer, and the night I won an Oscar, my father was sitting 20 rows away, staring at the dress he once refused to call anything but a hobby. He did not recognize the dress at first. No one did. That was the point. From the front, it looked like something between armor and smoke. A gown made of black silk, burned gold thread, and panels of fabric that moved like they were remembering fire. Across the bodice, hundreds of tiny stitches curved like scars. The skirt fell in layered pieces, each one painted by hand, each one carrying faint silver lines like unfinished sketches. When I walked, the train opened behind me like a stage curtain, and inside the lining, hidden until the cameras caught it, were 3 words embroidered in gold: not a hobby. By midnight, people would be calling it the most talked about dress of the Oscars. By morning, fashion writers would be comparing it to legends I had studied in, library books I could not afford to buy. One critic wrote that it had the myth-making of Aiko Ishioka and the emotional violence of McKean. Another wrote that it was not a dress at all, but a revenge thesis stitched in silk. But in that moment, under the lights, I was not thinking about headlines. I was thinking about a living room 12 years earlier. I was thinking about my father leaning back in his chair, holding my design school acceptance letter between 2 fingers like it was a grocery receipt, and saying, "I don't have money to waste on fabric and sketches, Elena. If I have extra money, I'm spending it on your brother's future." Then he looked at my portfolio, the one I had spent 3 years building, and added the sentence that stayed with me longer than any cut, bruise, or insult ever could. "Noah has a future. You have a hobby." At the Oscars, the presenter opened the envelope. The room went still. My brother Noah was sitting beside my parents. He had a small role in the film, small enough that most people would not have remembered his character's name, but large enough for my parents to call everyone they knew and say their son was in an Oscar-nominated movie. They had come for him. They had dressed for him. They had posed for pictures in the hotel lobby for him. They did not know I had designed the costumes for the film. They did not know my name was on the nominee card. They did not know the dress everyone was already whispering about had been built from the very dream they had laughed at. The presenter smiled into the microphone, and the Oscar goes to. My father's face was relaxed then, proud, prepared to applaud politely for someone else before turning back to Noah and reminding, this was only the beginning. Then the presenter said my name, Elena Mercer. For 1 second, the room exploded, and my family disappeared. Then I stood, and as I walked toward the stage, I saw my father understand. Not slowly, all at once. His mouth opened slightly. My mother's hand moved to her throat. Noah lowered his eyes. And I walked past all of them wearing the thing they had refused to fund. But this story does not begin at the Oscars. It begins in a house where one child was treated like a future, and the other was treated like a bill no one wanted to pay. Before I go back, take a second to like this video if stories about underestimated people hit you somewhere personal. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and whether anyone in your life ever called your dream just a hobby. Because I promise you, I know exactly how that sounds when it comes from someone who is supposed to love you. Now let me take you back. I grew up in a house where talent was only valuable if my father understood it. My brother Noah was 2 years older than me, and from the time he was 9, everyone said he had presence. He was handsome in the effortless way some boys are handsome before they ever learn kindness. He could walk into a room and make adults smile. He knew when to laugh, when to lower his voice, when to tilt his head, as if he was listening deeply. My mother called him magnetic. My father called him a natural. I called him Noah. At first, I did not resent him. I was too young to know there was anything to resent. He liked performing, and I liked making things. When he was cast as a prince in a school play, I made him a cape from an old curtain and gold ribbon I found in my mother's sewing box. It was crooked, too heavy on one side, and completely impractical. But when he stepped onto that stage, the audience gasped, not because of him, Because of the cape. After the show, parents kept saying Noah looked incredible. No one asked who made it. That became the pattern of my childhood. Noah stood in the light. I learned how to make the light behave. When he had auditions, my parents bought him new clothes. When he needed headshots, they paid for the best photographer in the city. When he wanted acting camp, my father wrote the check before the sentence was finished. When I asked for fabric, I was told to use what we already had. When I asked for a sewing machine that did not jam every 20 minutes, my mother said maybe for Christmas. Christmas came. Noah got private acting lessons. I got a sketchbook from the drugstore. I still used every page. I designed gowns for queens who had been betrayed, coats for soldiers who were secretly afraid, dresses for girls who looked delicate, until they turned and you saw the blade hidden in the back seam. I did not just draw clothing. I drew the lives people were trying to survive inside. I did not have language for that yet. I just knew fabric could tell the truth when people could not. By the time I was 16, I was altering clothes for half the drama department. Girls came to my room before dances because I could make cheap dresses look expensive. Boys came before auditions because I knew how to make a jacket sit on their shoulders like confidence. Teachers began asking if I had thought about design school. I had, of course I had. I had a folder on my laptop called Possible Futures. Inside it were saved pages from costume design programs, fashion institutes, scholarship forms, portfolio requirements, interviews with designers, articles about stage wardrobes, red carpet history, museum collections. I knew the names of designers the way other girls knew pop stars. I knew Eiko Ishioka before I knew how to pronounce her name. I had found photos of her work on a library computer and sat there, staring until the librarian told me they were closing. Her costumes did not look sewn. They looked summoned. I knew Alexander McQueen not because I understood fashion is business, but because I understood beauty that hurt. I knew Colleen Atwood, Ruth E. Carter, Sandy Powell, Edith Head. I knew that costume design was not decoration. It was architecture for the human body. It was psychology with seams. It was memory you could wear. My father knew none of this. To him, I was a girl who liked fabric. In our senior year, Noah was accepted into a private conservatory in Los Angeles. Not the best school in the world, not impossible to get into, but expensive enough to make my father walk around for a week telling people it's an investment. He used that word constantly. Investment. Noah's acting coach was an investment. Noah's headshots were an investment. Noah's apartment near campus was an investment. Noah's plane tickets were an investment. Then my acceptance letter came. I had been accepted into a respected costume and fashion design program in New York. Not with a full scholarship, not even close, but with enough aid that it was possible if my parents helped. I had a portfolio review note from one of the faculty members saying my work showed unusual narrative instinct and emotional range. I printed that email and placed it on top of the acceptance packet. I remember carrying it into the living room with both hands. My father was watching a business news channel. My mother was folding laundry. Noah was upstairs packing for a campus visit my parents had paid for. "Dad," I said, "can we talk?" He muted the television but did not turn it off. I handed him the packet. He skimmed the first page, then the cost breakdown, then the scholarship information. For a moment, I let myself hope. That was my mistake. He sighed. "Elena." Just my name, but I knew from the way he said it that I had already lost. "It's not as much as Noah's school," I said quickly. "And I can work. I can apply for more scholarships. I don't need everything. I just need help with the first year, maybe housing or supplies or..." He raised one hand. That small gesture shut me up faster than shouting would have. "We're already stretched because of Noah." My mother kept folding laundry. I looked at her first because some part of me still believed she would say something. She did not. My father set the packet on the coffee table. "I don't have money to waste on fabric and sketches, Elena. If I have extra money, I'm spending it on your brother's future." The room went very quiet. I remember the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I remember the television ticker moving silently across the bottom of the screen. I remember a blue towel in my mother's lap. I said, "This is my future." My father laughed once, not cruelly, which somehow made it worse. It was the laugh of a man correcting a child. "Noah has a future. You have a hobby." I looked at my mother again. She still did not look up. "It's not a hobby," I said. My voice sounded small. My father leaned forward. "Then prove that without asking me to pay for it." That sentence should have broken me. Maybe it did, but not in the way he expected. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor with my portfolio around me, and for the first time in my life, I did not cry because my father had failed to see me. I cried because I'd still been waiting for him to. There's a difference. By morning, something inside me had gone quiet. I declined the design school offer because I could not afford it. Then I took the first job I could find near a tiny community theater, 2 bus rides away from our house. The job was not glamorous. It was not even officially design. I steamed costumes. I labeled hangers. I mended hems. I washed sweat out of shirts between matinee and evening performances. I learned which fabrics died under stage lights and which ones came alive. I learned how panic sounds when an actor splits a seam 5 minutes before curtain. I learned that a costume only matters if the person wearing it can breathe, move, sweat, cry, and become someone else inside it. Design school might have taught me theory. Backstage taught me consequences. The first year was brutal. I worked at the theater during the evenings, a dry cleaner in the mornings, and a fabric warehouse on weekends where I was paid almost nothing but allowed to take damaged scraps that would have been thrown away. My hands were always cracked from detergent. My nails were always broken. I smelt like steam, dust, old velvet, and coffee. At night, I designed. Not because anyone had hired me to, because I did not know how to stop. I redesigned every production I worked on in secret. If the theater was doing a cheap Victorian melodrama, I made sketches of what it could have been if grief had a silhouette. If they were doing Shakespeare with polyester doublets from storage, I imagined what power would look like if it had been exiled for 10 years and forced to return in borrowed clothes. Sometimes I showed the sketches to directors. Most smiled politely. A few let me help. Then one let me design. It was a small production in a basement theater with 60 seats and a ceiling so low the actors had to avoid one light fixture during a sword scene. The budget was $400. Total. I spent half of it on dye, thrifted curtains, broken jewelry, and upholstery remnants. The play was about a queen who loses her kingdom but refuses to take off her crown. I made the crown out of bent wire, cracked mirror pieces, and thread. The gown started pale and became darker, scene by scene. The actress never changed fully on stage, but I built hidden layers that could be pulled, torn, reversed, stained, and rewrapped. By the final scene, she looked less like a fallen queen and more like a woman who had crawled through her own funeral and come out ruling something no one could take. The audience was small, but they remembered. After that, directors at tiny theaters began passing my name around. Not for big jobs, not for money, for impossible ones. Call Elena. She can make it work. That became my reputation. If a production had no budget, no time, no resources, and a director with a vision too large for the room, they called me. I should have hated that. Sometimes I did. But I also learned faster than people who were protected from difficulty. I learned to make beauty without permission. I learned to build tension into seams, history into stains, class into fabric weight, secrets into lining. I learned that clothing could reveal a character before they opened their mouth. Meanwhile, Noah moved to Los Angeles. My parents paid for everything. The apartment, the acting coach, the headshots, the workshops, the networking events, the short film trips, the emergency rent when he needed space to focus. Every time I called home, my mother found a way to bring him up. Noah had a callback. Noah met a casting director. Noah's teacher says he has something. Noah might be close. Close to what? I never knew. But he was always close. I was always still doing costumes. Once at Christmas, after I'd taken 2 trains and a bus home with a garment bag full of repairs because I could not afford to stop working, my father asked if I was still playing dress-up for theater people. I smiled, not because it was funny, because I had learned that if I let every insult cut me open, I would bleed out before I ever got anywhere.
Yes.
I said, still playing dress-up. Noah laughed. My mother said, don't be sensitive. I left the next morning before breakfast. After that, home became a place I visited less and less until eventually I stopped pretending I missed it. By 24, I was working in off-Broadway theaters, still underpaid, still exhausted, but no longer invisible to the people who mattered in those rooms. I had built a small network of directors, actors, stage managers, and costume supervisors who trusted me because they had seen me solve disasters with $10 a needle in 2 hours. One winter, I designed costumes for an experimental play called The Ash Garden. It was not supposed to change my life. No one in that basement knew a man named Adrian Blackwood would be in the audience on closing weekend, as Adrian Blackwood had already won 2 Oscars. He made films people argued about for years. He was famous for being difficult, brilliant, patient, and impossible to impress. His films were beautiful in a way that made you uncomfortable. He did not use costumes as clothing. He used them as weather. I did not know he was there. If I had known, I probably would have stabbed myself with a pin. The Ash Garden was about a village where every family had to surrender one memory to survive a war. The script was strange, spare, and haunting. I designed the costumes to look as if the characters were slowly losing parts of themselves. Sleeves lined with childhood fabric, coats patched with old wedding lace, aprons strained in patterns that looked almost like maps, a child's dress with one pocket sewn shut because the character had forgotten her sister. The audience did not clap immediately at the end. They sat there first. That is when I knew we had done something right. After the show, I was backstage, kneeling on the floor, pins between my teeth, repairing a torn hem before we packed everything away. Someone behind me said, "Who designed these costumes?" I did not look up at first. People ask that sometimes, usually because they wanted to borrow something. Then the stage manager said my name in a tone I had never heard before. Elena. I turned. Adrian Blackwood was standing in the doorway. For a second, all I could think was that his coat looked more expensive than our entire production. He looked at me, then at the costume in my lap. "Can you tell the designer I'd like to speak with her?" My mouth went dry. I pulled the pins from between my teeth. "You're speaking with her." He stared at me for half a beat too long, not disrespectfully, just recalculating. Then he stepped inside. "These costumes," he said, "are the only reason the 3rd act works." I should have said thank you. Instead, because I was tired and socially stupid when overwhelmed, I said the 3rd act works because Mira stops dressing like someone waiting to be forgiven. He tilted his head. I pointed at the costume rack because apparently I had decided to lecture in Oscar-winning director in a basement. In Act 1, everything on her body is symmetrical. She believes order can save her. By Act 3, the closures are off-center, the hem is uneven, and the fabric at her throat looks like it's trying to choke her. She doesn't say she's falling apart. She wears it. Adrian looked at the rack for a long time. Then he smiled. Not kindly, hungrily, like he had found something. "What are you doing next month?" he asked. I thought he meant another play. I said, "Probably ruining my sleep schedule for very little money." He laughed once. Then he told me about his film. The working title was The Saint of Hollowmere, a period fantasy drama, he said, though not the kind with clean kingdoms and pretty gowns. It was about a girl raised in a royal court that survives by erasing the names of the women who hold it together. It was about power, inheritance, memory, and the violence of being made ornamental. He did not want historically perfect costumes. He did not want dresses that looked expensive just because the budget was large. He wanted clothing that felt inherited, stolen, repaired, cursed. He wanted the audience to understand who had power, who had lost it, and who was pretending before anyone spoke. While he talked, the theater around us disappeared. I saw a girl in a white gown lined with black thread because purity had been forced onto her like a sentence. I saw a queen whose sleeves grew heavier as she lied. I saw soldiers wearing uniforms that looked polished from far away, but up close were made of mended family cloth because the kingdom was rotting under ceremony. Adrian stopped talking. I realized I had gone silent. He asked, "What are you thinking?" I said, "You don't want costumes that look expensive? You want costumes that remember what happened to the people wearing them." For the first time that night, he looked genuinely surprised. Then he said, "Bring me something in 2 weeks." I did not sleep much for those 2 weeks. I still had jobs. I still had repairs. I still had rent due and a toothache I could not afford to address. But every free hour went into Hollowmere. I read the treatment Adrian's assistant sent me until the pages softened at the corners. I made mood boards from museum archives, medieval mourning clothes, insect wings, burned paper, religious icons, medical braces, rusted armor, funeral lace. I dyed scraps in tea, ash, wine, and iron water. I burned edges. I stitched gold thread through black wool until my fingers cramped. For the main character, Seraphine, I designed 5 stages: the obedient daughter, the decorated prisoner, the unwilling saint, the girl who becomes a symbol, the woman who stops asking the court to name her. I built 3 sample pieces: a collar that looked delicate until you realized it was shaped like a restraint, a sleeve lined with red thread that only showed when the arm moved, like a wound opening, and a bodice panel made from layered translucent fabric with text underneath that could not be read clearly, as if someone had tried to bury a history and failed. When I brought the samples to Adrian's office, I expected a meeting with assistants. Instead, Adrian was there with 2 producers, the production designer, and a woman from the studio whose watch probably cost more than my yearly income. I laid everything on the table with hands that would not stop shaking. No one spoke for a while. That silence nearly killed me. Then Adrian picked up the sleeve. He turned it under the light. The red thread flashed and disappeared. He looked at me. "You didn't design clothes," he said. "You designed grief." The studio woman leaned forward. "Can she handle a production of this scale?" I wanted to disappear. Adrian did not look away from me. "Can you?" Every basement, every impossible deadline, every actor crying in a dressing room, every torn hem 5 minutes before curtain, every night I had worked until my hands hurt, all of it stood behind me.
"Yes,"
I said. My voice did not shake. "I can." 3 days later, I had a contract. Not as an assistant, not as a junior. Costume designer. For an Adrian Blackwood film. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the contract in my lap and laughed until I cried. Then I cried until I could not laugh anymore. I wanted to call someone. That was the cruel part of big moments when your family has never known how to hold you. Your hand still reaches for the phone before your heart remembers there is no one safe to call. So I called Mara Chun. Mara was a costume supervisor I had met on a terrible production where the director changed the entire final scene 2 days before opening. She was precise, terrifying, loyal, and able to measure an actor while making them confess their deepest insecurity. She had become my closest friend without either of us formally agreeing to it. When I told her, she screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone from my ear. Then she said, "You understand this means you can never again pretend you're just getting by." I said I might vomit. She said that too. For 1 week, I let myself be happy. Then the full production packet arrived. Script, character bible, visual references, schedule, Preliminary class list. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened the file like it was sacred. Most of the names were famous enough to make my stomach twist. Academy Award nominees, theater legends, a young actress everyone said was about to become huge, a British actor my mother loved. Then, halfway down the supporting cast list, I saw it. Noah Mercer, Captain Elias Rowe. I stopped breathing. Not metaphorically. My body forgot how. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. Noah Mercer, my brother, in Adrian Blackwood's film. A small role, yes, but not background. Enough to be fitted. Enough to be photographed. Enough for my parents to boast. Enough to pull my entire past into the one room I had thought belonged only to my future. My first thought was, I can't do this. My second thought was, I have to do this. Then the third thought came, the one that made me hate how small my family could still make me feel. What if they find out and make it theirs? What if my father says he always knew? What if Noah tells people he introduced me? What if the biggest opportunity of my life becomes another family story where I am edited into the corner? I closed the laptop. Then I opened it again. No! I had earned this before I knew Noah was attached. I had earned this in rooms my family never entered. I had earned this with hands they never held. I emailed Adrian and asked if we could speak privately. The next morning, I sat across from him in his office with my spine so straight it hurt. One of your supporting actors is my brother, I said. Adrian listened. My family and I are not close. They do not know I am attached to this film. And I would prefer to keep it that way for now. I can do the work. I will do the work. But I do not want to be on set for his fittings. Adrian did not ask for gossip. That made me respect him more. He only asked, will this affect the design? No. Will it affect your ability to lead the department? No. Then we protect the work, he said. Hire someone you trust for his fittings. I hired your eye, Elena. Not your willingness to bleed in public. I think that was the first time a powerful man had ever made room for my boundary without making me pay for it. I hired Mara. Officially, she was senior assistant costume supervisor. Unofficially, she was the wall between me and a family history I refused to let contaminate the work. Noah's first fitting happened 3 weeks later. I was in the design studio surrounded by fabric samples when Mara video called me after leaving set. Well, she said, your brother is handsome in the way men are handsome when no one has ever made them question if they deserve space. I laughed despite myself. Did he know? Not at first. My stomach tightened. At first? Mara sighed. He asked who designed the uniforms. I said Elena Mercer. He went quiet. I looked down at the table. And then he said Elena is my sister. I waited. He didn't sound proud. Mara said. He sounded afraid. I did not know what to do with that. For the rest of production, Noah did not contact me. He did not tell my parents, at least not then. Part of me was grateful. Another part understood too clearly why. If Noah told them, then the story changed. The family investment story broke. Their son was no longer the only Mercer attached to an Adrian Blackwood film. Their daughter, the Hobie, was designing the world he would stand inside. So, he stayed quiet. I stayed away. And the work became everything. The Saint of Hollowmere consumed 18 months of my life. I built a costume department from people who were better than me in ways I needed. Dyers, embroiderers, leatherworkers, milliners, textile artists, breakdown specialists, pattern cutters who could make fabric, obey geometry like magic. For the first time, I had resources. Real resources. Not unlimited, but enough. And that scared me more than poverty ever had. When you are used to making beauty from scraps, abundance feels suspicious. You keep waiting for someone to snatch it back. The first week, I over-explained every choice because I thought expensive rooms required justification. By the third week, Adrian pulled me aside. Elena, he said, stop asking permission for the thing I hired you to do. So I stopped. And then the film changed. Seraphine's first gown became almost too perfect, a pale ceremonial dress with embroidery, so tight it looked like control. Underneath, where no one would see unless she moved, I lined it with charcoal gray silk, because the court had already begun staining her. The queen's costumes became heavier throughout the film, not in visible jewels but in structure. Boning, layered collars, sleeves that restricted her reach. Power as a cage. The soldiers wore uniforms repaired with domestic fabrics, because the kingdom had been surviving on the unpaid labor of women for generations. For Noah's character, Captain Elias Roth, I designed a uniform that looked noble from far away and borrowed up close. His cuffs were slightly too ornate for his rank, his boots too polished, his sash too new. A man desperate to appear closer to power than he was. I did not design that out of revenge. At least that is what I told myself. Maybe I was lying. When the film wrapped, Adrian hugged me once, briefly, awkwardly, like neither of us knew how to do gratitude. Then he said, "Whatever happens after this, do not let them turn you into a footnote." I did not ask who he meant. I already knew. The film premiered at Venice. I did not go. I told myself it was because I was busy. The truth was, I was not ready to stand anywhere Noah might stand with. Our parents nearby, all of them pretending the past had been a misunderstanding. The reviews came fast. The first headline I saw was about the lead actress. The second was about Adrian. The third was about the costumes. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. One critic wrote, "The costumes do not decorate the Saint of Hollowmere. They haunt it." Another wrote, "Elena Mercer's work announces the arrival of a major visual storyteller." I read that sentence 11 times, not because I did not believe it, because some part of me was trying to memorize what recognition felt like when it did not come from begging. The film opened wider in December. By January, awards conversations were everywhere. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design. Noah appeared in a few cast interviews, always smiling, always careful. My parents shared every clip he was in. My mother posted screenshots of him standing behind the lead actress in one scene, with captions like, "So proud of our son." Then magazines began publishing features about the design of the film. My name was in the headlines. My sketches were printed. My interviews were quoted. My father shared one article because Noah was mentioned in paragraph 2. He never mentioned that the headline was about me. That hurt less than I expected. By then, I had learned something important. Being unseen by people committed to not seeing you is not invisibility. It is their limitation. The Oscar nominations were announced on a Tuesday morning. I watched them alone in my apartment, wrapped in a blanket, coffee untouched. When Best Costume Design appeared on the screen and they said my name, I did not scream. I went completely still. Then my phone began to explode. Mara, Adrian, the producers, actors, journalists, old theater friends, people I had not heard from in years. Then a text from Noah. "Congratulations." One word. No exclamation mark. No apology. No acknowledgement of the impossible shape of it. Just congratulations. I stared at it, then placed the phone face down. 10 minutes later, my mother called. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. "Elena, honey, we just heard Noah's film got so many nominations. Isn't that wonderful? Your father and I are going to Los Angeles for the ceremony. Noah invited us. Maybe we can see you while we're there if you're still doing wardrobe things." Still doing wardrobe things, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes life writes dialogue so cruelly perfect that if you put it in a movie, people would say it was too much. They were going to the Oscars. For Noah, they still did not know I was nominated. Or worse, they knew and had not connected it to me. I thought that would devastate me. Instead, it clarified something. I did not want to tell them. Not yet. I wanted them to walk into that room carrying the story they had chosen. Then I wanted the truth to stand up without asking for permission. The dress began as a sketch at 3:12 in the morning. I had a stylist by then. Offers from fashion houses. Designers willing to loan me gowns I once would have been afraid to touch. Everyone had opinions. A young Oscar nominee should look elegant, fresh, not too risky, not too theatrical, not too angry. I thanked them. Then I designed my own dress. Because after everything, how could I wear someone else's vision on the night the world might finally understand mine? I named it Not a Hobby in my sketchbook. No press release, no announcement, just the truth. The dress was not meant to be pretty, though parts of it were. It was meant to carry a history. The bodice was built like soft armor, structured but made entirely from fabric. Because I wanted it to look protective without pretending I'd become hard. Across it I stitched tiny gold lines over black silk. Not clean embroidery, but irregular marks like repaired cracks. The skirt was layered with panels that looked almost like torn paper from far away. Up close, each panel carried faint fragments of sketches, sleeves, collars, hands, measurements, unfinished figures. The kind of drawings people dismiss before they become real. The train was the risk. When closed, it looked like a dark formal sweep behind me. But when I walked under strong light, the inner lining flashed with hundreds of measuring tape motifs, all hand-painted, crossing and recrossing like paths. At the center of the lining, hidden low enough that only a camera angle or a careful eye would catch it, were the 3 embroidered words. Not a hobby. Mara saw the final fitting and cried. I told her that was inconvenient because she was holding pins. She said, "Elena, this is not a dress." I said, "Then what is it?" She looked at me in the mirror. "It's testimony." On Oscar night, I arrived alone. Not because no one would have come with me, because I needed to enter that room as myself, without being held up by anyone else's narrative. The red carpet was chaos. Flashbulbs, shouting, publicists, handlers, people whose faces I had seen on screen since childhood. At first, photographers called for the actors behind me. Then the dress moved. The train opened as I turned, the lining caught the light, and suddenly the shouting changed. "Elena, over here. Who are you wearing?" I smiled, myself. That clip went viral before the ceremony started. Inside, people stopped me in aisles. Actresses asked to touch the sleeve. A director I had admired for years said, "I have never seen grief look expensive before." A fashion editor stared at the lining and whispered, "Oh my God." Then she saw the words, "Not a hobby." Her eyes lifted to mine. She understood. Not the details, but enough. My parents entered with Noah 20 minutes before the ceremony began. I saw them before they saw me. My father wore a black tuxedo and the expression of a man pleased with his own life. My mother wore silver and kept touching Noah's arm as if to remind the room that he belonged to her. Noah looked good. Nervous, but good. For a moment, I felt the old pull. The child in me wanted them to turn, to see me, to gasp before the world made them. They did not. They walked to their seats. My name was in the program. My face had been on nomination graphics for weeks. My dress was already trending. My interviews had been published everywhere. But they did not see me because they had never trained themselves to look. The ceremony began. Awards passed in waves. Laughter, music, speeches, applause. I sat still, feeling the weight of the dress around me like memory made visible. When Best Costume Design approached, Mara squeezed my hand from the seat beside me. Adrian turned around from 2 rows ahead and nodded once. The presenter walked out. The clips played. Each nominee appeared on the screen with images from their film. Then mine. The Saint of Hollowmere filled the theater. Seraphine in the white gown with the black lining, the queen wrapped in power that looked like punishment. Soldiers wearing a kingdom repaired by invisible hands. Then my face appeared. Elena Mercer. 20 rows away. My mother made a sound. I did not hear it. I saw it. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father leaned forward, eyes narrowed, as if the screen had betrayed him. Noah did not move. That told me everything. The presenter opened the envelope. There are moments when time does not slow down. It sharpens. The room, the lights, the fabric against my skin, Mara's fingers crushing mine. Adrian's shoulders in front of me, my father's face turned toward the stage. All of it became painfully clear. And the Oscar goes to a breath. Elena Mercer, the saint of Hollowmere. The room rose around me. Not everyone. Not at first. Then more. Mara screamed. Adrian stood. The lead actress was crying. Someone behind me shouted my name. I stood carefully because the dress required dignity. Then I walked. Not quickly. Not because I wanted drama. Because for the first time in my life, I was not rushing to prove I deserved to be somewhere. The stage steps were brighter than I expected. The Oscar was heavier than I imagined. The applause kept going. When it finally softened, I looked out at the room. I found my father. He looked smaller than he had in my memory. That surprised me. For so many years, his opinion had been a wall. At the Oscars, under all that light, he was just a man in a chair who had been wrong. I leaned toward the microphone. Thank you to the Academy. Thank you to Adrian Blackwood for trusting a designer he found in a basement. Theater with a world this large. Thank you to the actors who let me build not just what they wore, but what their characters were afraid to say. My voice was steady. Then I paused. There is something I want to say to every artist whose dream has ever been called a hobby. The room changed. Not loudly, but I felt it. When I was 18, I asked for help building my future. And someone told me there was no money to waste on fabric and sketches. I was told my work was not a future. It was a hobby. My mother lowered her head. My father did not. For a long time, I thought that refusal had taken something from me. I thought it had closed the door. I looked down at the Oscar in my hand. But it only forced me to find another way in. The room was completely silent now. The basements taught me. The dressing rooms taught me. The ripped seams, the ruined fabric, the sleepless nights, the actors crying and half-finished. Costumes, all of it taught me. My dream had not been funded. It had been forged, and there is a difference. I could feel my dress under the lights, the gold stitches catching fire. A funded dream can still carry the fingerprints of the people who paid for it. A forged dream belongs only to the person who survived the fire. Mara was crying openly now. So, if you have a dream and someone calls it a hobby, keep going. If they laugh at it, keep going. If they refuse to invest in it, keep going. Even if that person is your own father. A small sound moved through the audience. Not shock exactly, recognition. Because a dream does not need permission to become real. It only needs you to keep choosing it when everyone else calls it a hobby. I took one breath. They can refuse to fund your dream. They can refuse to respect it. They can refuse to see it. But they do not get to decide what it becomes. Then I lifted the Oscar slightly. Thank you. The standing ovation started before I stepped back. I do not remember leaving the stage. I remember the hallway behind it, suddenly quiet after all that sound. I remember Adrian hugging me. I remember Mara repeating, "You did it," like she was trying to convince both of us. I remember a producer crying into her phone. I remember someone from Vogue asking who made the dress and Mara shouting. She did, obviously, with the rage of a woman who had been waiting years to say it. I also remember my father finding me 20 minutes later. He came with my mother and Noah. They looked misplaced backstage, like people who had walked into the wrong ending. My father spoke first. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him. I did not feel anger. That was the strangest part. I had imagined this moment so many times with rage in my mouth. But when it came, rage felt too heavy to carry. "You were reading every article about Noah." I said my name was in all of them. My mother cried silently. "We didn't know," she whispered. "No." I said, "You didn't look." My father flinched. "Elena, I said things when you were young. I made mistakes. You made choices. He swallowed. I was trying to be practical. I almost smiled. That word, practical. The favorite hiding place of people who do cruel things with calm voices. You were practical. I said, you invested where you saw value. His eyes moved to the Oscar in my hand, then to the dress, then back to my face. I think that was when he understood the worst part. He had not just failed to help me. He had failed to recognize value when it was standing in front of him. Asking to be seen. Noah had not spoken yet. Finally, he said, I knew before the nominations. My mother turned to him. What? Noah's face tightened. I found out during fittings. My father stared at him. You knew your sister designed the film? Noah looked at me, and for once, he did not look like the golden child. He looked tired. I didn't want to tell you, he said. My father's voice hardened. Why? Noah laughed once, bitterly, 'cause then it wouldn't be my thing anymore. There it was. Honest, ugly, human. My mother began to cry harder. I should have felt satisfaction. I did not. I only felt how small the whole room had become. For years, I had imagined my family as the final judge of my worth. But backstage at the Oscars, with the world outside calling my name, their drama felt like a language I had outgrown. Noah looked at me. I'm sorry. I nodded. Not forgiveness. Not punishment. Just acknowledgement. My father said, can we talk after this? As a family? I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, not tonight. Elena. Tonight is mine. That stopped him. Maybe because no one in my family had ever heard me say something belonged to me and mean it. I walked away before they could answer. Not because I was running, because there were rooms waiting for me where no one needed to be convinced I belonged. By morning, the dress had become its own story. Not the Oscar, the dress. Photos of the lining were everywhere. Close-ups of the gold embroidery. Threads about the measuring tape motifs. Fashion channels breaking down the structure. Critics debating whether it was couture, costume, performance art, or confession. Someone posted, this is what happens when the girl they refuse to fund becomes the culture. Another wrote, not a hobby is going to be quoted by every art student for the next decade. Vogue requested a cover. Vanity Fair requested an interview. 3 major actresses asked if I would design their next red carpet looks. A museum curator emailed about acquiring the dress for a future exhibition on fashion and narrative identity. A luxury house offered a collaboration before lunch. By the end of the week, people were no longer calling me only a costume designer. They were calling me a fashion visionary. I was careful with that word. Visionary. People love to make myths out of women after they survive what no one helped them carry. But I also refused to shrink from it. I had spent too many years making myself smaller so other people could remain comfortable. So I said yes carefully. Yes to the Vogue cover, but only if Mara styled the shoot with me. Yes to the museum conversation, but not until I was ready to let the dress leave my hands. Yes to selected collaborations, but not as someone's inspirational mascot. Yes to designing for women who understood that clothing could be armor, confession, memory, and warning. 6 months after the Oscars, I launched my first capsule collection. I called it Still Going. No crowns, no kingdoms, no revenge slogans, just clothing built around movement, survival, and the private architecture of dreams people tried to dismiss. The first piece released was a black jacket lined with handwritten phrases from artists around the world who had been told their work was not serious. Dancers, painters, writers, designers, musicians, kids from small towns, mothers returning to old dreams, people working double shifts and still creating at midnight. On the inside cuff of every jacket, stitched where only the wearer could see, it were 4 words, keep choosing it anyway. The collection sold out in 9 minutes. My father sent flowers. I donated them to the theater where Adrian had found me. My mother wrote letters. Some I read, some I did not. Noah and I spoke once over coffee in New York. He apologized more honestly than I expected. I believed him more than I wanted to, but even then, I knew something had shifted permanently. He was no longer the center of the wound. My father was no longer the voice in my head. The living room was no longer the place where my future had been decided. Whatever happened back then, it made me, not softly, not kindly, but completely. For years, I thought my father had taken something from me when he refused to pay for my dream. I thought the money he withheld was the door I had been locked behind. But time has a cruel way of becoming honest. The money would have made my road easier, maybe cleaner, maybe safer, but it would not have made me this. The basements made me this. The dressing rooms made me this. The ripped seams made me this. The ruined fabric, the unpaid nights, the burned fingertips, the costumes I remade at 3 in the morning because something in them still did not feel alive. All of it made me this. My dream had not been funded. It had been forged, and there is a difference. A funded dream can still carry the fingerprints of the people who paid for it. A forged dream belongs only to the person who survived the fire. So, if you have a dream and someone calls it a hobby, keep going. If they laugh at it, keep going. If they refuse to invest in it, keep going. Even if that person is your own father, because a dream does not need permission to become real. It only needs you to keep choosing it when everyone else calls it a hobby. And when the world finally calls your name, you will understand something no one can teach you and no one can take from you. They can refuse to fund your dream. They can refuse to respect it. They can refuse to see it. But they do not get to decide what it becomes.